Alanis, in terms
Hi.
of your work on personal development, I know this is really, really important for you in your life, maybe also in your professional life, I don't know. How did it all start?
Yeah, I mean the proclivity and the tendency toward inquiry inside and bouncing between microservice to relationships and self-development, and then macro service, stepping up and showing up for whatever pillars or serviceful agenda through art or otherwise. It's always been resonant to me, and I've always understood energy and played with it. And you had mentioned earlier before we jumped on together that there's a tendency 25, 30 years ago for it to have been made fun of, the desire to go within or to raise consciousness. There's so many ways to speak about it, but the good news is now it seems to be the kind of conversation that everyone's engaging in, and I'm here for it. But the whole idea too that it's isolation and loneliness that leads us to behaving in ways that continue any kind of divisiveness, or it has us believe the lie that we are disconnected and that we're alone and that God has abandoned us and no one cares anymore and everyone's dangerous. And there's all these thoughts that come from our survival agenda. This imperative to stay alive has us do all kinds of animal things that speak a lie about the consciousness that is available in human beings. We have, for the most part, we have access to the neofrontal cortex, the pineal gland. We can take advantage of these and experience the felt sense of connection while we're in the body, not just on the deathbed, not just when we're transitioning.
The first time you have that oceanic feeling, right? That feeling of, oh my God, actually I'm not separate from everything, right? There's this felt sense of connectedness. I think it's unforgettable the first time you have it. When was, like, how far back does that go?
Well, I think not unlike Adyashanti, whom we both really respect and love, he was talking about it being, sort of glimpses, the idea that awakening can happen in a sort of piecemeal glimpses of the felt sense of connection or the all. For me, it's just pieces. It's not one revelatory moment. It's different experiences, direct experiences with doing a lot of embodiment practices for me, because my survival strategy was such that I would just keep soldiering and just kind of jumping out of my body, dissociating. And so my journey has been about coming home to this this situation, this body, and the finiteness of certain elements here, and then the infinite element of the spirit, and what is subject to death and birth, and then what is not subject to death and birth.
So what do you do today? So in any given day or right now, what is really helping you, and what are you into these days?
Yeah, the resources. I'm a human being, so over the years I've tried all kinds of things to seek relief, for lack of a better term. I have sort of a whack-a-mole addiction approach, where sometimes it's work addiction, sometimes it's, over the years I've had a relationship with food that's been a little charged, to say the least. It could be anything. It could be alcohol. It could be, there's so many different ways to temporarily find relief. For me, it was about seeking an ongoing lens or an approach that would allow for pain, that would allow for joy, that would allow for anger, that would allow for all these states of being that are temporary. And then have some inquiry brought to it too, like, what part of me is scared right now? What part of me is livid? What part of me is excited? What part of me is bored and doesn't want to be here? What part is neutral?
You feel that this world that seems to, in a way, become more and more unconscious, on the other hand, there's kind of this eruption waiting to happen, and you see more people talking about consciousness, and more people talking about the need to. There's clearly something we're not getting here, right? There's clearly something we're not figuring out, and you feel that we're at that stage and maybe accelerating towards that.
Well, the evolution has been happening always, right? So there are moments where something happens that is so divisive, whether it's politically, war, a pandemic, where it can really rupture the connection because ultimately we need each other. And this is where it gets tricky for those of us who are traumatized in relationship to find out that we have to go back to the dungeon to create the healing. You know, the idea of I'm being invited back into relationality when relationality was where the initial trauma or the wounds came to be, you know. So it's a brave warrior act to believe in consciousness when we are so subject to our animal selves. I mean, when we're at war, when we're reactive, when I want to punch somebody, and if we actually do it, the impulse is the impulse, right? We have a whole planet. I have a million impulses that would probably, you know, be deemed horrifying, right? But I stop myself with the consciousness. It will come in and I'll say, well, this will create more havoc than if I were to communicate it in a different way. Or if all this intensity of anger, really unexpressed anger in our culture, unexpressed yearning for touch and attachment correction and warmth and that sort of uterine experience, we're all craving it. We all need it. It's our birthright. We're built to want it.
How important for you is this theme of mental health, and are we paying enough attention and the right attention to it? What do you think about that?
Well, in some ways, the idea of mental homeostasis, right? It's not mental perfection. It's not running after another standard of this is how I would be thinking if I were good, or this is how I would be moving if I had some higher consciousness. Or it's, you know, Eckhart Tolle talks about stress being here but wanting to be there. But I love that definition of stress. You know, I am in resistance to what is, and then everything follows. The suffering follows, right? So for me, there's a beautiful paradox happening here, because there is something very simple about approaching our humanity, and the pace of slowness and attention and attunement is everything. You know, that the mirror neurons, the polyvagal theory, all of these incredible new theories that are being provided for by Steve Porges and everybody, really speaks to the in that particular polyvagal theory, it speaks to a whole system in our bodies. So I'm very curious about all the multiple systems, the endocrine system, how the brain works, how the gastrointestinal speaks to this part, the second heart, the muscles, the organs. You know, as a child, I wasn't taught about those things. You know, I wasn't taught about where my liver was, or proprioception. I didn't even know what that meant. And why would I want to be able to access parts of my body with awareness from my brain? And why would I want to be embodied? Why would I want to do this subtle work and return to my body?
And what about music, Alanis? What is the role of music in all of this? And in your particular case, what has been the role of music?
Yeah, music for me, you know, in terms of what is taught in school, we were taught, you know, we're taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and a few other really mandatorily imposed things. And some of that is great if that's what we're passionate about. But the idea of we're these whole systems with our senses, our intellect, how we think, how we behave, and just the general spirit. I mean, we're such multitudinous.
And do you talk
right?
about that in your
again?
music all the time? Because some people think you do, right?
Yeah.
If you look at some of your, you know, incredible hits that, you know, I have them in my youth background all the time. I mean, we were both born in 1974, so I grew up listening to you, and some of those, when you go back, they do have this kind of, there is something there that is linked to this inner work and to this philosophy, that so powerful philosophy that you have, even from the early days, right? Even from, is that true, or am I speculating a bit?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's very true. I've always been looking through this lens because it happens to be how my worldview is I grew up in Europe very briefly from Canada. My mom's Hungarian, my dad's French, and just they love the planet. My parents have always been traveling and always, basically instilled in us that our country is one way amongst thousands and millions of approaches, so that was really liberating. But yeah, I think the sensitivity has always been there, and I can see it in people's eyes. I can see when someone's eyes are taking in a lot of information and the wheels are spinning and they're processed. It's just fun to watch the magic of how any given human being operates. But in music, it's very somatic. So the lyric can conjure ideas and be more intellectual and more engaging cognitively, which is great, painting pictures basically. The music is very body, so how it animates you. Do you want to curl up in a ball? Do you want to run? Do you want to sweat? Do you want to not sweat? So it's just the idea of hashtag movement culture. I just think the energetic movement, the physical movement, the blood flow, the circulation.
But definitely music for many of us, plays a super important role, and for that, we all thank you deeply.
Thank you for the work you do in the world. It's really generous and empathic and speaks the truth about our connectedness. So thank you so much.